But now, early last week we discussed the public sector strikes that saw hundreds of thousands of workers take to the streets. But on Friday a more modest campaign began around just one employee, Tomasz. A member of the IWW trade union, Tomasz claims he was unfairly fired from his job and is seeking to expose the bad employment practices of his boss, Dennis Mouzakis, at the Greedy Greek Deli on Sheffield Road. Tomasz, welcome to Talking Sheffield.
Hi.
Hi. So tell me, first of all, what happened? How did you end up being fired?
Well, up until Friday before last, I was working at the Greedy Greek Deli. The owner is a very difficult person to work for, quite a notorious local employer.
Why is he? Why is that?
Well, put it this way, there have been claims of a lot of things going on. For example, tips going missing or being taken, you know, customers being shortchanged. His behaviour with employees is very inappropriate, and employees are forced to work unpaid trials in order to get the job. What actually happened was it got to the point where the owner was physically aggressive with me. I calmly brought up with him at the end of a trial shift, and he dismissed me on the spot in response.
Okay, when you say he was physically aggressive, what was he doing?
Well, he essentially slapped something out of my hand.
Right, why did he do that?
As I say, it's someone who's constantly sort of shouting, insulting staff, harassing them, and he just went over the top. The guy's obviously under a lot of stress, and he just did that, and that was obviously completely unacceptable. I simply said to him, Dennis, earlier on, you know, you did this is unacceptable, you have to know that you can never do this again. Those were my exact words. In response, he simply said, well, I don't need you anymore in that case.
Wow. So straight after you saying that, he said, I won't need you in that case. Okay.
So it's very clear that this is, you know, basically it's someone who doesn't tolerate any sort of anyone challenging the way he does things. He runs the shop completely as his kind of personal fiefdom, and it was purely in response to me bringing up something very simple, essentially him breaking the law by treating me in this way, that I was dismissed.
Okay. In response, we've spoken to Dennis Mouzakis of the Greedy Greek, and he says simply you weren't suitable for the job. You failed to bring in your P45 and other details, and you were on trial anyway, and couldn't keep you on. You weren't suitable for the job, and you failed to bring in your paperwork. Is that right?
Sure. I mean, you know, this is obviously a complete fabrication. Yeah, the paperwork wasn't sorted out for a while, but it is the employer's legal responsibility to sort out tax issues, including providing me with a P46 if necessary. Eventually, I did sort that out with them after, you know, pointing out to them it was actually their responsibility. In terms of me not being suitable to the job, again, obviously it's completely untrue. I was a very hard worker. All the staff there will testify to it. You know, I took this job not for fun, but because I needed money. I was keen to keep it, and as I say, I was fired on the spot, you know, in response to me bringing up an issue of how he was treating me.
Okay, so that was under 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? That you,
the firing, yeah.
That
sure.
you were sacked. What did you decide to do after that? You're a member of the IWW union. What was your response?
Well, yeah, thankfully, you know, I'm in quite a good position in that I actually have a very good union, the IWW, and they've got right behind me and basically backed me up in whatever I wanted to do. I've decided to lay down some very simple, you know, demands. They are that Dennis treats his employees with respect and, you know, follows standard procedures to discipline them or anything like that, things that were not followed with me, that he stops forcing workers to work up to 20 hours unpaid, the legality of which is dubious to say the least, and then I get my job back with back pay. We first of all went and talked to Dennis calmly about this, gave him the demands, and this is a very important issue for us because unfortunately cases like this are far from unique. You know, the catering industry is one of the lowest paid in the country, and what we're doing is essentially showing that people don't have to take this kind of behaviour from employers. They can, you know, push back and get better conditions for themselves.
Yeah. Okay. So you say you're pushing back to better the conditions of work. Mr. Mouzakis says the protesters are bullying and blackmailing him. Blackmailing him because they say, these are the demands, if you don't agree to them, we'll close you down. So that doesn't sound like a genteel negotiation to improve things. That sounds, in Mr. Mouzakis' words, strong-arming.
Well, as I said, we first of all went and spoke to him very calmly. Our demands are extremely reasonable, essentially for him to stick to the law in how he behaves with employees and in his employment practices. And we're in constant negotiation with him. You know, the fact of the matter is, I've been unfairly fired. I've lost my only source of income. I'm struggling to pay the rent, and we're simply responding as a union should respond. And if unions did this more often in this industry, then, you know, it wouldn't be one of the lowest paid industries in the country.
Okay. Now, in terms of some of the issues there, on the issue of unpaid trial shifts, you mentioned up to 20 hours of unpaid work. Mr. Mouzakis says every time someone begins work, he explains what's going to happen. So you implicitly accept that you're going to do this. There's the 20 hours that he doesn't call a trial shift, he calls that voluntary work, and then he says then you go on to a trial for 3 weeks, which is paid, and in that period of voluntary work it involves seeing the place, how it works, explaining the nature of the work to the new starter, and then if they're happy, they carry on. That seems like does it not seem like a reasonable thing to kind of get you used to the place and then kind of take you on properly? Is that not a fair arrangement?
Well, first of all, he's clearly misrepresented how things actually happen. In my sort of interview for the job, he called it an unpaid trial. It was never referred to as voluntary work until after I was fired, and he realised that what he was doing could get him into, you know, legal difficulties. The law on these issues is essentially that you should only do an unpaid demonstration of your work only for as long as it's necessary to prove that you have those skills, and that must be supervised by someone for the entire duration of that time. So, for example, if you're, you know, trying out to be a mechanic, you need to show that you have the skills necessary, which might take an hour or two. I had to work 20 hours, which other people did as well. You know, that's 3 days, completely normal shifts. You work, you know, you show what you can do in an hour, you learn everything else in 2, and then after that you should be paid. But we weren't doing you know, free labour, which he has actually referred to as that before, in saying that, you know, this isn't just free labour, it's this, that and the other, but so he's kind of accepting that he is benefiting from it financially.
Yeah, okay. Now, he's benefiting financially, but the actions of the union are to target, obviously, his income. And how you did that on Friday was a protest at the deli on Sheffield Road. Talk me through what was that about, and what did you hope to achieve, and what did you achieve?
Well, you know, we're a global union with many years of experience of dealing with, you know, abusive employers. We're taking industrial action in order to put pressure onto this employer to show them that this isn't okay, and essentially, you know, to make them accept the demands which we're placing. Again, very reasonable demands. To that end, you know, we're calling on a community boycott for people to go elsewhere until this issue is resolved.
So not to eat at the Greedy Greek?
Not to eat at the Greedy Greek, you know, the kiosk in town or on Sheffield Road, or to place orders. To support us for all possible via our Facebook page, you know, IWW Sheffield. And we will be picketing and we'll continue to do this for as long as is necessary.
Okay, we've got some images now of a friendly-looking bunch, but nonetheless, obviously, it was trying to put off customers from going in, and it was successful in turning some people away. And that was the point, that you would both get a more wide publicity, but also stop people from eating on the Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, everything we did was very good-natured, completely legal. You know, the owner called the police beforehand. He got that there were actually, throughout the night, there were 5 police, 2 standing at the entrance of his door. There were 2 police vans, a jeep, all this. The police were completely fine with what we're doing. You know, if anything, even they were supportive. The staff at the store are very supportive. You know, these are people that have worked for a long time, essentially in fear, raising even the smallest of issues, because this employer is very unscrupulous and will dismiss people at the drop of a hat, essentially. But yeah, it was very successful. We were asking people to not to go there. We had great support from the public, and we'll be back there this week and for as long as is necessary.
Okay, so you said that you've got the support of the staff within the Greedy Greek. Again, coming back to Dennis Mouzakis, the owner, he says, by threatening to close the shop down, the protesters, and I quote, are trying to put 15 hard workers out of a job. You obviously refute that because you think...
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you know, our demands are extremely reasonable. A single picket like that will cost this owner more than it will cost to meet all of those demands. Those demands are, again, for him to essentially stay within the law and not to, you know, force people to work for free, which is a horrible practice, a widespread practice, and something that we need to start challenging wherever it pops up, including in our local stores and our communities.
Okay. As the pickets continue this Saturday evening, and Mr. Mouzakis says in response, when asked how do you hope this issue will be resolved, he says, I will defend myself with the law and will involve solicitors. It's a big attack on my name. So obviously he's concerned. He's going to try and combat this any way he can, and you'll continue with your campaign. Thank you very much, Tomasz Morgan, for speaking to me on Talking Sheffield.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. That's all.